Chapter 18. The door of the cabin opened, and Jasper appeared. "Come inside, quickly!" he quietly instructed, his paranoia causing him to look around dramatically for any that may be following them. As the two entered, Jasper carefully closed the door behind him, mumbling what sounded like he was attempting a warding spell of sorts. Hannah felt a chill run up her spine, her hands rubbing her arms in order to get warm. Seer, noticing her dilemma, removed his cloak and swung it about her. Hannah's eyes met his, and she shared a grateful nod. Unfortunately, that's all she could share. "What happened to her mother and her brother?" Jasper asked, following Seer as he walked about the cabin, gathering supplies for something. "They are still at the castle. Her father will be bringing them here shortly. Hopefully," Seer replied. "You mean the Reaper will be back?" Jasper frantically said, though attempting a whisper, his consonants were quite pronounced. "Yes, I thought he would leave us be if you assisted him. My nerves were almost calmed, and now you tell me he is to return? That he will be back here, at what is meant to be a sanctuary for us two?" "Jasper," Seer began in a calm, level-headed tone, "remember to breathe. As for the Reaper's return, our quest is not yet done. Matters within the castle are growing complicated, and the sorcerer's role in the kingdom mirrors. Whatever the outcome, things will change from here on out, whether for the better or the worse." Seer walked with an armful of supplies to his work table. He carefully arranged them in his space and began to search through a stack of books near him. Once he put on his glasses to read, Jasper and Hannah understood he was not to be disrupted. Jasper clumsily stepped toward Hannah, who sat on a chair huddled in the ruby cloak, its fiery color not enough to warm her frozen self. He took a seat next to her and forced a sympathetic smile. Hannah returned it, though she felt her eyes start to water as she did so. She quickly looked to the ground, embarrassed by her fragile nature. "The king must have been overjoyed to marry a woman as lovely as yourself," Jasper whispered, his words trying to break through her makeshift shield against others. Hannah's empty eyes met his, which were glittering and vibrant, full of life, unlike her own. She sighed. "I don't suppose so. I'm plain, simple, completely ordinary, and nothing special," Hannah responded. Her tone, though self-deprecating, was not self-pitying. Her words were honest, but the emotion behind them was non-existent. She had returned to a state of numbness. Her thoughts continued to race, but she ignored every one of them, not wanting to think about anything. The butterflies which filled the pit in her stomach sat on the outer walls, motionless, lacking the energy and motivation to move. "I'd rather be simple than complicated any day," Jasper compassionately responded. His tone was one of a caring father. However, this observation was lost amidst the thoughts spinning in Hannah's head. Jasper placed a hand on her shoulder, the sensation catching Hannah off guard. Her eyes met his. Hannah noticed Jasper wore a smile. "You know, there is beauty in everything, even simplicity." "Thank you, Jasper," Hannah mumbled. "I just don't know what to think anymore. One second I'm selling bread at a bakery, and the next I'm a queen. One second I'm running from the town to escape death, and the next I rush into it to help a sorcerer. I just can't understand these thoughts or this world. It's overwhelming, to say the least." Hannah felt her eyes water, a few tears escaping from her control and running down her cheek. She took a few deep breaths in an attempt to calm herself. "I am so worthless," Hannah said. In the past week, her life had been full of many ups and downs, a life she was unaccustomed to. The stress may have broken her, her fluctuating, unstable emotions, and her despairing, irrational thoughts seemed to have already given up on the simple girl. Hannah felt the pressure on her shoulder increase. She looked up and noticed Jasper intensely staring at her with his ice-blue eyes. His eyes, so full of life and vibrancy, made him appear younger. "You are not worthless," Jasper stated in a serious tone, one Hannah had not heard him use in her time with him. She assumed it to be the stern tone he used with students, one Seer was more than likely familiar with. His blue eyes, Hannah knew she'd seen the exact color on another. Jasper continued, "King Daedalus may be easily persuaded on certain issues, but he would by no means make light of choosing a queen to accompany him in leading this kingdom. His mind may be weak to outside forces, but the boy's heart is strong. However, you, both strong in mind and heart, have much promise in leading. Your relations with the people, your ability to think and act for yourself. Even within the royal classes of this world, women such as yourself are few and far between. A political marriage would have been more beneficial for power and expanding the kingdom. The royal advisor knew this and would have preferred the king to marry into another royal family. However, the marriage was rushed. The king didn't want one of royalty, but a citizen of Wyvernon. He had hundreds of young women to choose from. Who did he choose? Jasper looked at Hannah with glowing eyes. Hannah didn't know whether his question was rhetorical or not, but as he continued to stare at her, she realized he was attempting to teach her a lesson. It was refreshing to Hannah, to say the least. She knew herself to be queen, but she didn't want this new detail to affect the way others treated her. Jasper treated her as he may a student, with immense respect and honesty, no matter how difficult the latter may be. Jasper did not change his expression. Hannah sighed and answered, "Me." A wide grin covered Jasper's face, and he leaned back, removing his hand from Hannah's shoulder. Hannah's eyes circled the room, trying to avoid Jasper's. She noticed Seer gazing in their direction. He smiled, then returned to his work. "How do you know so much about the king?" Hannah asked. Jasper's entire manner changed. He was no longer the teacher. His posture dropped, and his entire person swayed despite him sitting. But the youthfulness in his face remained, his blue eyes staring into the distance, as if some visual that only he could see existed. "King Daedalus reminds me of my younger brother. When we were mere children, my brother and I would go to the town bakery, the one in the shopping district. Really good place. Haven't been there in years. Not that I'm allowed to walk into the shopping district anymore, with myself being a sorcerer and all. Anyways, one day when we went, there was only one snoogle left. We both really wanted it, but I wanted it more. Oh yes, I wanted it much more. I ended up convincing him that the berry pastries were well loved among everyone in the kingdom, that eating a berry pastry would make him live forever, and also make him the most loved man in the kingdom. And would you believe that he bought it? I got my snoogle, and he got his berry pastry. I felt bad at first, but he really enjoyed that pastry. You know, I think it had a mixture of raspberry, blackberry, and elderberry. I know the one you're talking about," Hannah said, her eyes focusing in on Jasper. Her curiosity piqued, and she wondered if he would say what she most expected. "How does this relate to King Daedalus?" "Oh, yes," Jasper said, flustered as if being pulled from a dream and having to find where he left off. "Well, one day my brother met a woman. She was beautiful and soft-spoken. Her confidence and self-esteem were low. This confused my brother. He was unused to people being so unsure of themselves. Well, one day my brother married this woman, against everyone's wishes, aside from my own, of course. His mind was weak, with my persuading him to eat a berry pastry over my snoogle, but his heart was strong. He loved her, despite her class and despite her flaws. I left to learn sorcery soon after, but I never doubted in their combined strength and intelligence. He made a great king, and her a great queen." "You are royalty?" Hannah questioned, more so in shock than disbelief. "No, I was, but no longer. My father heavily disapproved of sorcery, and I was disowned, removed from my family ties before my brother was crowned. My brother and I were close. He wanted to help. However, so many laws were already in place, the idea of lessening restrictions on sorcerers was not a popular idea at the time. The Guild of Sorcerers would never allow me to serve among them because of my past with royalty. I see parts of my late brother and his son." "Jasper," Hannah started in a solemn tone. She felt her breathing and her heart rate return to normal. "Things will change, I'm sure of it." Jasper and Hannah shared a smile. "This is not right," Seer anxiously stated, his comment an aside from the conversation between Hannah and Jasper. Seer stood and began pacing. He rubbed his hands along his jaw while shaking his head in frustration. "What's wrong?" Hannah innocently asked, hoping her question would not enrage him. Seer looked up with eyes widened, as if he had forgotten she was there. He closed his eyes and scratched his head, unaware how to answer the question. Gazing up at her once more, Seer sighed in resignation to withholding his information. "Your father, he's not left the castle." "No." Hannah shook her head in disbelief. A pit dropped into her stomach, and she felt water build up in her eyes. No, he said he'd come back. With Ma and Van. He can't not return. Not again. Seer opened his mouth to respond, but remained silent. His expression was one of sympathy, a feeling he didn't quite know how to put into words. Rather than attempt to comfort Hannah, Seer turned to his work table and grabbed a few components to put into his burlap sack. He removed his glasses and glanced at Hannah, realizing she was still wearing his cloak. Jasper and Hannah watched him carefully, Jasper subtly shaking his head. Without any explanation, Seer headed for the door. However, Jasper shakily jumped in front of Seer, preventing him from leaving. Jasper, please. No, it's too dangerous. You owe them nothing, Jasper angrily whispered, despite Hannah being near enough to hear anyways. I do. No, you don't. You don't owe anyone anything, now or ever, because I taught you not to. Remember? I am the master, and you are my apprentice. You must listen. Please listen. Don't go. Jasper's argument sounded like he himself was only half convinced of his words. Whether he spoke of fear or sheer stubbornness, Hannah couldn't tell. Nothing will change, Seer furiously stated. Jasper's eyes widened, and his hands began to shake at his sides. He gathered his sapphire cloak in his fingers, clenching the cloth in his fists. Hannah frowned. This was the first time she had seen Seer lose his calm composure. Seer's eyes showed his shame in snapping, but the fire within him could not be tamed. If he gets away with this again, matters won't progress. They'll only get worse over time. I have to go. Then I'm going with you, Hannah said, the resolve in her voice evident. Jasper tightly squeezed his eyes shut and dramatically shook his head. No, 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 he mumbled. I can't let you do that. You're staying here. Seer spoke over Jasper. No, Hannah defiantly retorted. It's my family that's in danger. I told your father I'd keep you safe. I don't need to be protected by anybody. I'm capable. I'm not worthless, Hannah stubbornly replied. As she spoke these words, Hannah felt within herself as if she truly believed them. She was tired of the degradation not only from others, but from herself. Perhaps it was the title queen, but Hannah no longer wanted to be submissive and allow others to insult her. She was going to defend herself, her worth. Why does everyone automatically assume I'm incapable? I thought you were different, wanting to see everyone as equals. These are your father's orders. Since when do you serve my father? You said you don't agree with what it is the Reapers do. The argument is over. I need to go. I'm going too. Didn't you hear me? Seer asked, his deep voice quaking. His voice cracked during the latter half of the question, his authoritative, angry tone fading. Hannah noticed the change and leaned back. Her heart calmed a bit, the chill she felt from his tone cooling her own internal, raging wildfire. The butterflies in her stomach flew about, silently, causing a strange, indescribable sensation within her. Why? Hannah softly questioned. I told you when we jumped from the balcony. You have to live. You will be the one to make a difference, whether you feel so inside of yourself or not, for you already have. I am forever grateful to you, Seer said, his deep, soothing voice laced with solemnity and sadness. Any sacrifice I can make in your place will be well worth it. Time stopped. Hannah stared at Seer, the ruby sorcerer, as the environment and every odd contraption within it faded to the background. When he had said so earlier, she believed the heat of the moment caused him to say so, or perhaps he was exaggerating. But Hannah heard the truth in his tone this time, the honest, cruel truth, as if a sacrifice was the only option for others to open their eyes, as if peace could only come from the defeat of another, from ruining or taking another's life. Hannah didn't believe this. Violence wasn't an option. But how could one person stop this when both sides are ready to jump to war? Diplomacy? This being the only method Hannah had ever used in fixing what seemed broken. It was all she had. But matters had escalated. This time around, talking through the conflict may not be as simple. Hannah stared into Seer's amber eyes, thinking through some elaborate response. All ideas were scrapped. Hannah shook her head and closed her eyes. Her fingers stroked her palms, her fingernails digging into her skin. She felt the pain. This was real. If I can't even make a sacrifice for my family, how am I supposed to do it for an entire kingdom? No, I'm a queen, the queen. This conflict will end. Moral or rational obligation may be sacrificed, but no one, and I mean no one, will throw their life away to make a point. It's childish, Hannah stated. The only sound she could hear was her heartbeat and Sear's shallow breathing. She felt the fire within her ignite, like the light slowly shining forth from the broken lamp. We must be going then, Your Majesty, Sear said, with a grin worn upon his face. He turned to Jasper. Excuse us, Jasper. Jasper found difficulty in swallowing and hesitantly stepped aside. With his burlap sack swung over his shoulder, Sear walked out the door, Hannah following closely behind him. As they walked toward Wickborough, Hannah felt confident. Everything would be all right. She had hope, one she could not explain. The butterflies in her stomach weren't composed of nerves and anxiety, but strength and assurance. Sear noticed the change in her character and chuckled. There is a new air about you. It's fitting. Yeah, Hannah replied with a smile. I wish the clothes I'm wearing were more fitting of the occasion. I mean, it's a beautiful dress, but not the best for walking about in. The two passed through the gate, officially entering Wickborough. After a moment of silence, Hannah spoke up. Thank you. For what? Everything, I guess. I mean, if I hadn't have met you, I don't even know where I'd be. Probably under the ground somewhere. No. Hannah looked up at Sear, but he continued to look forward. You said it yourself. You are capable. He chuckled again. I started to wonder how long it would take you to come to that realization. I didn't want to press you too hard, but I had begun to think you had given up. Maybe I had, but not now, Hannah said, with a smile on her face. I refuse.